have long dwell times and that are really well located so that all of the public can access it easily. So entertainment venues, stores, like I mentioned, Target has the retail charging infrastructure. It's really helpful for people just to have that visible and easily accessible for them to use while they're doing things that they already plan to do, like go shopping or go see a movie, etc.
All right, with that, we're going to open it up for a few questions from the audience. So feel free to raise your hand and we'll get a mic over to you.
Hi, thank you guys for your input. My curiosity is, with Nevada containing some lithium, what are we looking at as far as mining in Nevada and creating a closed loop system where we have a resource much closer? And do we know what the economic impact in Nevada will be, and how can we are you guys looking at an environmentally friendly practice of mining of lithium in Nevada? I know it's a pretty intensive thing to mine and to process.
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry, I was like under the line a little bit. So a question around lithium in Nevada. That is very exciting to us. We don't have anything public that we can share about that. But those are discussions that we're always thinking about. I mean, part of the design with a gigafactory is start thinking about your supply chain in feet, not in thousands of miles. So that first step was partnering with Panasonic on this incredible adventure here, where the cells are made in the south side of the building, and then we're literally bringing them over in feet to put them in our energy products or vehicle products. And so that's something we think a lot about. And then regarding supplier responsibility, incredibly important, especially for a growing industry that's going to see an amazing amount of growth, that we have to be diligent in that on our side, and we have to look at every single material and think about those materials, that what can we gradually even get out of that. And then the second part of that is the recyclability. Again, being able to make the recyclability of these raw materials more a part of your supply chain.
I haven't looked at necessarily kind of the economics of lithium in Nevada, although I believe that Nevada has some incredibly large lithium deposits here that are currently being exploited, largely because the market forces support the exploitation of lithium here in Nevada. I think kind of changing your question a little bit, answering it slightly differently. One thing that we do have to think about is the future of these mining sites. Once we have exhausted the lithium supplies, what can we do with those? And one option I think is really great is turn them into solar farms, because people don't want to live on these sites because there have been chemicals there have been a lot of earth-moving activity. So I think in the future we need to start thinking about reusing these sites in great environmentally responsible ways, and one is putting big solar farms on these exhausted sites.
I hear hemp is a great that takes all sorts of amazing things for remediation.
Were you saying that hemp is a good remediator? I'll take your word for that. Sounds great to me. I think given the Governor Sisolak's latest budget, more hemp is probably good.
I agree.
I can see it now, lithium-infused hemp. All right. Any other question? All right, right there, sir.
Thanks for coming. As people know from earlier this morning, I have an old diesel Volkswagen. If I drive mellow on the freeways, I can get 500 miles per tank of diesel. So I have range anxiety. Now that I know the phrase, it's a great phrase. So where's the trend going to balance? Perhaps Mr. Bob Zine can help us with leadership. Balancing these charging stations that are really cool, at least between Reno and Las Vegas, versus better, awesome batteries for longer ranges. I mean, is one system actually a disincentive to the other for range extensions, or are we just going to have a lot of these charging stations and not worry about range? I mean, there's a balance in there, and how is that playing off?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's the parts of the cell chemistry, or you could have a cell that could recharge incredibly fast, but that will degrade very quickly over time. And so you really need to balance the long term for that. And so when we see with Model 3 up to 310 mile range, or Model S and Model X up to, I believe Model S up to 335, we do not hear about that as an issue for our customers, because again, that infrastructure, that 90% is either at home or at the workplace, and as you gradually increase, we've talked a little bit about the next version of our superchargers, and that's the next speed and next level there, and we feel like that is a really compelling piece of this as well. But I don't think there's a specific trade-off. I think it will be more. There's going to be a series of different networks that are coming out and really starting to see that across the board.
The one thing I'd say is you mentioned you get 500 miles of tank. My question is, how big is your tank? I mean, it could be a 500-gallon tank and you get 1 mile a gallon. I assume with a diesel Volkswagen, I had one a while ago, it was about 45, 50 miles a gallon. So just kind of play on that idea. One thing that I think is improving fairly rapidly is the energy density of batteries as well as the weight of batteries. So the more energy you can pack into a smaller space in a battery, the more batteries you can have, or maybe not even change the volume required, but you can have more energy per battery, which extends your range, as well as if you can have lighter batteries, that also helps extend the range. So I think those are developing concerns. And then to your point about, do longer range vehicles kind of affect the market for charging stations? I'm not sure. I look around and there's like gas stations on every corner. Most cars do have 300 to 400 miles of range at least, and we still have gas stations everywhere. So I'm not sure how the market's going to play out on that.
I think it's important to remember too that most people aren't driving 500 miles in one trip, and so likely if you're going to be driving 500 miles, you'd probably be stopping overnight, say at a hotel, which is why it's even more important for us to install charging stations at hotels, like the Tesla destination chargers are really important, as well as other level 2 chargers at those locations. But also, we've been seeing recently that a lot of oil and gas companies are investing more and more in EV charging stations. So it'll be cool in the future to see if like a Shell or a BP is going to have a charging station just along the road that you're going to see every single mile, and it won't even be an issue, and they'll be able to charge really quickly. So you can stop for like 15 minutes, get a full charge, and then move on.
We should also do a test drive after.
Yeah, just one other thing I'd add is, and this was brought up earlier, is just I think as the industry develops, there's going to be a variety of options. So, and there already are, right? So you can have ones that have a little bit less overall range, but might be more, they might be cheaper because they need less battery storage, and that might be more appealing for your kind of around town commuting vehicle. And then for folks that want to have something, a different model that travels further out, might have a little bit longer range. So that's a great question, though. Other audience questions?
Last
Yeah,
one.
I just want to,
Last one.
just on the charging station, and it was just sort of briefly mentioned up here earlier. First of all, I'm one of those oddball people who does drive his EV 1,000 miles without stopping overnight, and so there is a need for that. But most of your gasoline stations barely make money on gasoline. They're selling soda and cookies and chips and everything else, and that's their margin. That's where they're making money. So the same customer who stops and only has to fill their tank in 5 minutes for the gasoline pump may take 20 minutes with a supercharger, and so they're a better customer for that store than the person buying gasoline. So yes, absolutely, all those opportunities in those rural areas where you may not have quite as much economic development. I'm a better customer than the people driving gasoline cars. Thanks.
Great. Anyone have any? All right. I think we can take one more question.
Quick question. So Tesla owns the largest supercharging network. Are they planning to open that up to non-Tesla electric vehicles in the future?
That's a great question. We've had discussions about that. I'm not close to it, so I don't know exactly where that is. I know there's also a lot of specifics of how you would have to design the input and the inverter to work with our superchargers, and so that's it's a heavy lift, at least to get started. But yeah, it is ongoing discussions, especially as we build it out.
All right, great. Well, thank you to our panelists, and thank you to you all for your questions and engagement. And now we'll move on to the next part of our program.
So we're still sorting out our mic issue, and we know that the mics either go to that one or that one, and there's one that goes to both, but that one's not working. So we are trying to sort that out. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce Kyle Davis. He's going to be the moderator for our next panel on legislation and public policy. Kyle is the president of Davis Strategies, a Nevada advocacy and public affairs consulting firm. He has led clean energy and conservation lobbying efforts in Carson City for over 10 years. Prior to opening Davis Strategies, Kyle was the political and policy director for the Nevada Conservation League and then the district executive director for the American Cancer Society. Kyle holds degrees from the University of Nevada, Reno, and the George Washington University, and lives here in Reno with his wife and kids. Welcome, Mr. Davis.
All right, thanks, Rebecca, and thanks everybody for being here today. Thanks to the organizer of this event for having me be a part of it. Really excited to talk today about legislation and public policy as it relates to our topic today, talking about electric vehicles. The first thing that I want to do, I want to bring a couple of people up here to talk about specifically this type of an issue. So I want to introduce, start with Marie Steele. Marie is the principal at eCentricity LLP, a Nevada partnership offering expertise at the nexuses of energy, transportation, technology, and connected communities. Ms. Steele has 14 years of energy industry experience in the U.S., Europe, and the Middle East, and nearly a decade in the utility sector. So Marie, come on up. And I also want to bring up Lauren Rosenblatt. Lauren offers expert advice for existing and future electricity market participants. As a principal of eCentricity LLP, she helps public and private actors navigate the transforming world of electricity service and its confluence with new technology, transportation, and smart cities. So Lauren, come on up.
We're going to have a little bit of a back and forth song and dance, just an FYI.
Okay, as Kyle mentioned, we are eCentricity LLP. We're a Nevada-based LLP. We work out of Las Vegas. I think that the fact that... is this working? Okay, good. I think that the fact that we're all here today is a testament to the statement, why not electrification? The real question is how. Our report gives a series of action items that our government agencies and actors can undertake today to initiate the conversion to electrification. These are common sense ideas. They're not aspirational goals. We're not recommending that the state throw a bunch of money at incentives that it can't fund. We're not recommending that we look at projects for flying cars. Instead, we have a series of action items that fit within the daily business and operations of the agencies in question. All of the agencies we mention in this report are relevant, and they each have an individual role to play if the state is serious about its commitment to transportation electrification. A word about transportation planning in Nevada. There are a lot of agencies that plan for and around transportation. The key concepts in transportation planning reflected on this slide all point to system efficiency. System efficiency is reduced congestion, reduced traffic, reduced idling, reduced emissions, reduced accidents, and also right-sizing our transportation system so it meets the needs of the state. Our report finds that advanced mobility solutions and intelligent transportation systems, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, those are the ways that we're going to improve our system efficiency. But intelligent transportation systems and advanced transportation, they take money and they take planning. And our planning documents already state the need to prepare for this infrastructure. However, the technology is upon us, and the time to act on preparation is now.
So as we've already hit on pretty hard today, is there's been a ton of movement around electric and autonomous policy in the state. NV Energy has led the way for a very long time. We created the electric highway under Governor Sandoval. Last session, Senate Bill 145 created the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Demonstration Program. And if Vince and Ali can raise their hands in the room, NV Energy is here. So if you have questions on that new program or what their incentives are, you can reach out to them. So electric vehicles, we've focused on it. And then as we brought up, we have autonomous policy. And what we've noticed in most of our conversations is not everybody realizes those two are likely going to be one and the same. We are planning for them separately right now. Advanced mobility is one, advanced, connected, autonomous, and shared. So we need to think about that together. We have RTC Southern Nevada here, RTC Washoe County, both have autonomous programs. RTC Washoe has an electric bus. So we've done a lot, but I think we can all agree we can do a whole lot more. And we can use electric transportation as a pillar to grow renewable energy in Nevada and for economic benefits and all that we've talked about today. So in that, our dense and delightful report, I believe is...
I meant that it was complimentary. Dense.
As Lawrence...
Nutritious.
Right. But just keep with the hashtags. Keep it up. We went through extensive stakeholder engagement from Nevada players on how we can embrace this and the reality that we are in Nevada today and how to move it forward. So the action plan that we really do ask you to reach out and read it. It's, presenting it in 10 minutes that we're probably already over is impossible. So it comes up with an action plan for Nevada, 5 goals, 16 objectives, but it covers all transportation, not just vehicles, transit, TNCs, which is your Ubers and Lyfts of the world, e-bikes, and how to integrate it into the grid responsibly so that we can use it as a load that we can shift. So that is, we're going to walk now through about 5 of them very quickly on how to do that.
How do we begin with transportation electrification? The commitment that we want in investment and resources from the from private sector and from federal dollars is all about the signals and commitment at the state level. This is where our policymakers take center stage, and that first step towards initiating transportation electrification is a priority for the state. In order to do that, it's probably helpful to set some goals so that people understand the commitment of that priority and the scope of that commitment. But transportation electrification is complicated, so it goes well beyond the authority and the missions of any one agency. Therefore, this policy leadership will go furthest if there's also resource leadership, an agency or staff dedicated to coordinating and executing the action items amongst the many state agencies that will be involved in the process of transportation electrification. I think I heard embedded in Director Bob Zien's remarks that maybe the GOE is going to volunteer. But we can't ignore the importance of having an agency run point and the signal it makes to the public to invest in and with the state of Nevada on this issue.
So now the big thing that we've all been talking about, transit, and even sexier, school buses. I'm with you, Rudy. We're going to make it happen. How to address public transit and school buses. There are real realities of cost-benefit studies that we have to talk about. We have to study the use of these technologies within the different agencies. We have extreme temperatures and hills and snow in northern Nevada, and let's not pretend that Las Vegas isn't very hot in the summer. So we have to test these technologies, but with that time, we take now also working with the Public Utilities Commission on what does rate design look like. Also as well, a big thing with school buses is looking at different ways and different funding sources to use it as a grid asset. Can the utility own and operate that battery? And then the school districts just buy the shell. So there's many different things that we need to be looking at as a community and government agencies on how to embrace these technologies. And back to what everyone keeps talking about, grid integration. The PUCN is going to be incredibly important with this, with the utility as well. But we have the opportunity right now to set the right standards and regulations in place such that we can have smart charging, managed charging, whatever you want to call it, so that there's time of use rates and that we can call and contract load through the charging stations and use it for when the day comes that solar actually, we have the peak in the afternoon rather than the excess capacity at night. But we have the ability to do 30% more excess renewable electricity by coordinating EV charging and demand response as a mean of load shifting. So take the time now to set the right parameters.
Our goal 3, electrifying multimodality, is all about personal transportation options. And I want to focus on just one in particular because I think it's one of the more important ones. How many of you in here today in the last week have taken an Uber or Lyft? Raise your hand. Okay, a fair number of you. How many of you in the last week have taken more than one Uber or Lyft? Okay, still several. I count myself amongst those. So I think we all agree that the ride-hail and the ride-share services offered by transportation network companies like Uber or Lyft are now a prominent feature in our transportation landscape. And these cars, they are out and about all day long, as are commercial fleets for businesses that have a lot of cars out and about on the road. And in order for them to go electric, as we would like them to do, they need access to convenient, fast charging. We recommend in our action plan that the state initiate a public process where public actors and commercial actors who are all interested in a public charging infrastructure network come together to decide on important issues about what that network should look like. Citing where should the chargers be, how fast should the chargers be at particular locations, and whether the charging network should have some standardized features such as payment processing options. It is a very important first step in making sure that these vehicles have the public charging they need in order to be out on the road and not have that range anxiety even within town. At the same time, we think that the Public Utilities Commission would oversee a similar public process in which it and the same participants in the utility would decide important technical questions, interconnection standards, data exchange protocols with the utility, and how the utility would manage the charging around times of intense grid usage at certain times of day. That might also be the forum where we could talk about whether the utility should own and manage charging. We believe that in order to get an efficient network out there, we need to do it right from the outset, which requires this public process, and only the state could lead it. Still me. So I love this photo. This is courtesy of the RTC of Southern Nevada. It's their FAST Center. I mentioned earlier intelligent transportation systems. This is command and control for the circulatory system in Southern Nevada, where they have all of the roads up, and if you read the text there, you'll see just how much they have technical devices that help them monitor the system and also keep it running efficiently. Intelligent transportation has been around for, intelligent transportation systems, they've been around for a long time. And NDOT and the RTC of Southern Nevada have been investing in them for a while with ramp metering and signal coordination. But this area is really exploding and becoming much more exciting in terms of what the technology is and what it can do for our system. But to keep it going and to incubate that ecosystem, we need money, and importantly, Nevada needs to develop and attract the talent to keep it going. So that is a range of workforce development and new jobs from technical and vocational, working on the devices and the infrastructure, to the engineers that do the software and the hardware engineering. It's a very exciting area for us, and for Nevada to stay in the lead with advanced transportation, we need to invest in it.
I mean, I guess I can't emphasize that enough, is that the advanced mobility and smart communities that we are investing in so much in Nevada is also electric. And as we view these visions, don't keep them in a silo, because it will not benefit us the most. And last, I believe this is last, it is our last slide, fleets. The ability from state actors to electrify fleets is another huge ability to impact air quality, impact economic development, and integrate more EVs into the grid. But how to do that, as you can see, the number one barrier is the initial purchase price is prohibitive. How we buy cars and how we think about the business case needs to change. The total cost of ownership instead of the lowest cost of capital, when we make these decisions as a government and as private fleets, quite frankly, looking at it that way and what is available for us to purchase for electric vehicles is critically important. So procurement and process really needs to change at the state level if we're truly going to embrace fleet electrification. There we go.
All right. Thank you, Marie and Lauren. I'd now like to invite back to the stage is Matt Fromer. Matt, I believe we already talked about your bio, right? Yeah. So I'll just remind you that Matt is the Senior Transportation Associate for the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. So I'll turn the mic over to you.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you to my colleague Tom Polocalis for organizing this great event, putting me on the roster not once but twice. I get to bat both the second and eighth. And thanks to Marie and Lauren for your great presentation. I'd recommend everyone read their report. It's really awesome. It's jam-packed with creative ideas. Yeah. Hashtag nutritious. So I have a few more pretty pictures for you. This is a graph of monthly EV sales in Nevada for the past 3 years. And the green bars there are from 2018. So you can see significant growth, particularly in the summer of 2018. Nationally, we saw about 80% sales growth from 2017 to 2018. So the market is accelerating quickly, partially due to the sales of the Tesla Model 3. So just want to talk about the size of the challenge. So that's what sales growth looks like globally. It took about 5 years to reach 1 million EVs on the road, and then the last million we added took about 6 months, so it's growing exponentially, largely driven by China, which you can see in the red at the bottom there. And I just want to, just to illustrate the size of the challenge again, mention this quote by Martian man Elon Musk. There's 2.5 billion trucks and cars in the world. New cars and trucks equal about 100 million new vehicle sales per year. So even if you could snap your fingers and turn all new cars and trucks electric, it'd still take 25 years to change the transport base to electric. So even if we're 100% of the EV market share today, it would still take 25 years to get 100% of vehicles on the road electric. And this is just not fast enough. If you think about the urgency of the climate problem and our air quality, it's just not fast enough. So we need things like creative policy to push, accelerate the EV adoption. We start thinking about policy. I start from a point of the barriers. Why aren't people buying electric vehicles? And these are the big five. For me, it's first the high price point of the vehicle, limited model availability, which can vary by state depending on whether you have things like ZEV standards or a flourishing EV market to begin with. Number 3 is lack of charging infrastructure, insufficient dealership training, and then the public education and awareness. A lot of people still think that EVs are like golf carts, when in reality we've seen electric semi-trucks, 18-wheelers, go 0 to 60 in 6 seconds. It's pretty remarkable. To highlight some of the things that Nevada's done already with the VW funding allocation, and I think Dave went through this earlier. It allocated it's receiving $25 million from the VW cheating emission settlement. 15% of that will go to light-duty vehicle charging, things like the Nevada Electric Highway. The remaining 85% will go to replacing medium heavy-duty buses and airport equipment with cleaner vehicles. And I just want to particularly commend the state here. I work in states across the Southwest. We saw pretty underwhelming plans come out of Arizona and New Mexico, no funding set aside for electric vehicles. So I want to commend the state here for actually investing in electrification. Something to be proud of. And then looking forward, policy driving adoption. What are the opportunities that the state has? One is the zero emission vehicle standards. And what this does is basically requires automakers to sell a certain number of electric vehicles, a certain percentage each year, and that percentage goes up. In 2025, we're looking at 9% of all new vehicles would have to be electric. And so that can happen through something like an executive order. We've just seen that come out of Colorado and New Mexico. Lots of states jumping on board here because we don't exactly have the greatest leadership on clean energy from DC. So states are becoming more empowered. Another option is a purchase incentive, something like a rebate or a tax credit at the state level. I think this is particularly relevant because the federal EV tax credit is starting to phase out. It starts to phase out when the automaker has sold 200,000 vehicles. Tesla hit that point in 2019. GM did as well. So there's a $7,500 EV tax credit for Chevy Bolt available, but that number gets cut in half, I think, in Q3 of 2019. So take advantage now. Another potential policy is lane incentives for HOV and HOT lanes. Seen these in certain states where an EV can travel in the carpool lane without having 2 or 3 people in the car. I think that kind of gets consumers at that pain point when you're sitting in traffic and you see EVs flying by an express lane. You're like, maybe I will get one. Education and outreach efforts coming from the state, and just increasing awareness about electric vehicles, the technology. Where are charging stations in your community? And then lastly, and this is in the eCentricity report, looking at a Nevada electric vehicle plan with transportation emissions reductions targets. I also want to talk about local government and what we can do here in Reno, Washoe County, and around the state. First, leading by example, so electrifying the municipal fleet, and Ree and Lauren mentioned this before. Things like EV-ready building codes. We have all this new construction, building in that electrical panel capacity, the pre-wiring, things that get really expensive later on when you have to go in and trench up all the asphalt, and then repave it. The demolition costs, it's 3 or 4 times more expensive to retrofit versus include this in new construction. Working with transit agencies and school districts to electrify bus fleets, electrifying taxis and TNCs being Uber and Lyft. And then lastly, little EV perks like free parking downtown. Any little thing that'll just kind of convince consumers, actually, that could be a real benefit in my life. Maybe I do want an electric vehicle. That's all I have for now. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Matt. I didn't just turn that up. All right, great. Okay, the next person I'd like to bring up is Dylan Sullivan. Dylan is the senior scientist, senior scientist at the Climate and Clean Energy Program at Natural Resources Defense Council. He works to increase renewable energy and energy efficiency in the Mountain West States. He has a bachelor's degree in environmental geology from the University of Missouri-Columbia and a master's in civil and environmental engineering from Stanford University. And he is based out of their San Francisco office, but we have officially named him an honorary Nevadan after all the time that he spends here in the state working with us. So thanks for being
here. Okay, good almost afternoon. Thanks, Kyle, for the introduction, and thank you, Tom, for having me on the panel. And I also want to thank all of you for coming to this event, but more than that, just devoting your brains to this really important topic of electrifying our transportation system. I'll tell you a little bit more about NRDC, so it stands for the Natural Resources Defense Council. We're a member-based environmental advocacy group with 3 million members and activists nationwide, and 18,000 here in Nevada. So I'm really going to build on what the earlier panelists said, and I do want to definitely encourage you to read the report. It's the kind of report that if you drop it on the ground, it lands with a thud, but it's a good thud. It's that heavy. So. And Appendix B is a great list of basically all of the statutes at the local and state level that impact transportation and electrification, and Appendix B really is a great part. So I first want to say that I think it's good to just orient ourselves as to why policy should say anything about electric vehicles at all. And it's really key to understand that the policy action on electric vehicles is undergirded by their really key role in greenhouse gas and criteria pollution emission reduction. It's undergirded by the benefit for all electric customers of spreading fixed costs over more sales and using these batteries as a tool for renewables integration. And finally, just their benefits to drivers in the form of reduced fuel expenditures, of course, but also less time and inconvenience at the gas station pump and those really annoying screens that they have now. I don't know, they're the kind of screen I don't think anybody has ever stayed at the gas pump longer just to keep watching them. So the policy action is undergirded by those three things. But there's a really big infrastructure gap between where we need to be in say, even 2025 and where we're set to be based on current levels of investment. So the Center for American Progress, that think tank, looked at and this is just for DC fast charging, so the public fast charging infrastructure that we talked about earlier. They collected all of the public investments and VW investments over the 2025 time period, and basically the amount of electric vehicles needed to meet the Paris Agreement goals. And they found that there's a $2.3 billion funding gap just in DC fast charging between now and 2025 to get the infrastructure that we need. And that's just DC fast charging, so that's not talking about multifamily workplace and other things. There's also a big customer awareness gap. So a lot of my work at NRDC has been working on utility energy efficiency programs, and it's a totally different. It's a light bulb is not an electric vehicle. We're talking about a couple orders of magnitude of cost difference, but one of the things that I take a lot from electric energy efficiency programs where, say your inefficient water heater goes out. In order to replace that with an efficient model, you first need to make sure that there's even a efficient technology available. And if there's a technology available, you have to make sure that your retailer is stocking and selling it. And if they're stocking and selling it, it has to be attractively priced or competitively priced, or you're not going to get it. And then with an electric vehicle, you have to make sure you're able to charge it. So there are all these barriers that need to be addressed. And NRDC has worked a lot on electric vehicle rollouts in states around the country. And what we found is that electric utilities, with oversight from their regulators, are really uniquely situated to overcome these barriers and accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. And my NRDC colleagues have developed a helpful list of principles to guide electric utility investments in transportation electrification. The issue brief, I have it right here, is called Guiding Principles for Utility Programs to Accelerate Transportation Electrification. And if you email me, email me, I'll be happy to send it to you. And basically the principles are as follows. First, utilities should deploy charging infrastructure strategically. And what we mean by strategically is not in places where we know there's no need. And so the places where we know there are really key barriers are like multifamily charging, where if you live in a multifamily rental building, you might not own your parking spot, and utility investments could really help there. Another is workplace charging, which has been shown just to really dramatically increase EV adoption, and not necessarily partially because it provides a big social signal that this is something that is worthwhile and gets over that customer awareness gap that we talked about earlier. Of course, DC fast charging infrastructure is also an area where utilities can have a role. I'll talk more about that later. Another important principle is that we should use this electric vehicle investment that utilities might make to increase access, foster an equitable EV market, and improve local air quality. So, there are communities who have historically been left out of investments made by utilities and governments. And we need to make sure that those communities get benefits from electric vehicles. So a good example of that is school bus charging. And also, used EVs make great commuter vehicles too, and they're often really cheap. Don't ask me why, but I was at CarMax a couple days ago, and a used Chevy Volt is $11,000. So another important principle is, as we talked about earlier, just manage load and manage the electric vehicle load. So it's a tool for renewables integration, and that we're using electricity at low cost times. And also that customers can get fuel cost savings, because that's another important thing that's going to drive customer adoption. So, you know, in California, had we done nothing to make special EV rates, customers would be paying, a very expensive per kilowatt hour charge. But we rejiggered things and made it so that customers can see fuel cost savings, and it's still cost-based. Another thing you want to do, if electric utilities are going to be involved in this space, you want to make sure that they're just not getting the field, and that we do foster competition among and you leverage the expertise of private market electricity charging providers. And there are some ideas in the paper about how to do that have actually been implemented in jurisdictions. And then, of course, utilities can play a role in educating customers. And it's a unique role compared to the role of specific vehicle manufacturers, because those have a specific proprietary interest. NV Energy and other utilities are really well positioned for broad customer awareness campaigns. Now, the really good thing about in Nevada, among the many good things, but on electric vehicle and electric vehicle policy specifically, back in 2017, legislators passed Senator Spearman's Senate Bill 145, which created the electric vehicle program that we've talked about earlier. But it also and requires utilities to file electric vehicle plans. But it has a provision that allows utilities to include in those plans any measure to promote or incentivize the deployment of electric vehicle infrastructure. And they're allowed to recover reasonable and prudent costs in rates. NV Energy filed a plan, I guess it was last February, and I think they just filed this year's plan maybe today. Today? And their initial plan, is a $15 million plan, 15 million over 3 years. It has some rebates for chargers for fleets, workplaces, and multifamily buildings, a custom grant program for things like electric school buses, support for the electric highway, and some customer education and outreach. But they're not using all of the authority that was granted to them in Senate Bill 145, and this is really, not to throw NV Energy under a diesel bus. But or their regulators, or NRDC and the environmental groups who I think signed on to that plan. But it's just that we really could do more and be more ambitious with those utility plans. A couple of ideas are programs, not just rebates, for multifamily, workplace, public fast charging, and airports. So I think the difference between a program and a rebate is you can put a rebate out there that basically just sort of captures existing market opportunity, gives it a little adder. There's a difference between that and a rebate that actually sort of generates new activity in the market. And the difference between a rebate and a program is, in a program, you're proactively going out and trying to find those opportunities for your customers to go electric. We could also look at rate-basing make-ready infrastructure for charging. Midstream incentives to auto dealers are a really cool idea. So that's incentives to stock and sell electric vehicles, and then also customer education and outreach. So I'll stop there.
All right, great. So thanks everybody for that information. Get all of our panelists up here, and yeah, all of these tools theoretically are on wheels, but we can't seem to figure that part out. All right. Now that everybody's ready, hopefully, we'll have an opportunity to have a little discussion about some of these issues. So I heard a number of different, policy ideas, really in all three of the presentations that we heard. One thing I was hoping that somebody could talk a little bit about is low emission vehicle standards or zero emission vehicle standards that we've seen adopted in other states, and I think most recently, I think the most recent one, Colorado adopted low emission vehicle standards, but they have both next door to us. Is there somebody that could talk to us about those standards and if that's something that makes sense for Nevada?
I'll go first. So I was just researching this the other day. California had a long battle. They enacted their standards under what's called the Pavley Law back in 2002. And then they embarked on a long series of waiting before the EPA. The Bush administration denied without reason the new standards, and then they had to litigate with the car manufacturers. These standards were finally passed in the mid-2000s, 2007, 2008. And California and the car manufacturers immediately embarked on the manufacture and sale of cars 2009 to 2012, 2013 to 2016 that fit within those standards. In those intervening years, DC and 13 other states have adopted those standards. The process is, I should mention that the litigation ended and was favorable to California just as the Obama administration came into being. And the EPA then had a very quick approval process for those standards. In the intervening years, the states had to go and also ask the EPA for a waiver so that they could also implement these standards. Again, the EPA was under the Obama administration, and I think that process happened very quickly. So now we have 15 states out there that have these higher standards for lower vehicle emissions. Nevada would go through a similar process, and there's a lot of precedent that the EPA should grant Nevada the waiver so it could put those standards in place. But with the current administration, one never knows just how long that would take.
Yes, so we should talk to our vehicle attorneys. But my understanding is that only California had to seek the waiver, and that once they sought it, basically you can't have in Clean Air Act stuff, you can't have everybody's worried about a third car. So you can either choose the California rules or you can choose the general, the not California car. So
every state has to go before the EPA and get permission to adopt the California standards.
But it has to be either the California standards or the federal standards.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's only two options, yeah.
Okay.
And just to expand a little bit on the actual value of a ZEV program, the Zero Emission Vehicle Program, what we're seeing is there are way more EV models, much more model choice available in states that have adopted ZEV. So for example, in New Mexico, there's an executive order earlier this week, they're going to adopt ZEV. And some of the statistics were published that there are 44 electric vehicles offered in California and the other ZEV states. Only 14 of those were offered in New Mexico. So what this really does is require the automakers to bring those EV models to invest marketing dollars in that state.
Great. And Matt, since you're holding the mic, I've got a question that I'd like for you to start on, which is I know that you had a number of different policies listed in your presentation of things that have been done in other states to encourage EV adoption. What would you say is the one policy that has been the most successful in multiple states in terms of really causing an explosion in EV adoption?
Sure, yeah, happy to comment on that. There's a report recently from NASIO that showed that the top two policies are adoption of the ZEV standard and then some sort of purchasing incentive, either for the electric vehicle or for EV charging stations. And then there's a wide spectrum of how successful those either tax credit or rebate could be. The most successful ones are fully refundable, so they don't depend on your tax appetite. You can recover the full cost of the credit. And they're also assignable, so they're cash on the hood at the time of purchase. And again, I think that would really help to offset the phasing out of the federal EV tax credit and bring down that barrier, that high cost, the price premium of the electric vehicle versus a gas-powered car. So those are, I think, the big two.
Great, thanks. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think that correlates back to the prior question as well, is that an incentive and a ZEV mandate kind of go best hand in hand together.
Well, good job, Marie, holding the mic, because I get... Well, Dylan, you have something you add to that?
No.
Okay. And whoever wants to answer this, but one acronym that I've heard thrown around that I'm not sure I really understand is ACES. Is there somebody that can explain to me what that is?
I think since I harped on it enough in my comments, ACES is autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. And it goes back to that entire holistic advanced mobility conversation. Smart cities, autonomous, and electric, we need to be planning for all three of them together. So when you think of ACES, it's not just, our gambling here in Nevada, it's advanced
It's
mobility.
our baseball team here in Reno.
Right, that's true. Sorry. We changed the name of ours down.
It's your
south.
basketball team down there.
Right. But as we think of planning for all of those as an economic pillar in Nevada, we need to embrace all advanced mobility.
Great, thanks. Well, I'd like to open it up to the audience now. If there are any questions. Oh,
I'm sorry, Kyle. We have just a few minutes left for photos with some of the EVs that are parked outside. And as much as I love that everybody's opened up and has seen the inside of the Teslas, there's a couple of other non-Tesla vehicles that are out there that are locked, and we were hoping to get photo opportunities with those before we lose our photographer. So if you are in the room and you would like to share your vehicle for a photo op, we would greatly appreciate that. Thanks. Sorry, Kyle.
head out the back there and go open your car, please. All right. Do we have any questions out in the audience?
One of the problems with EVs is having only about a 1% market penetration. It's the appalling ignorance of how EVs perform and so forth. So I'm thinking when I hear about fleet vehicles and trucking and so forth, if we push these things into those fields where people use them every day, delivery people and so forth, I think that would go a long ways towards spreading the word on EVs. So I wonder what any of the panelists think about all the ideas for getting them out into that kind of place.
I'll start. So I think the news is better than you think. So global EV market share last year is 3.4%. So it's actually increasing very quickly. And I think we know a lot about what it takes to sort of jumpstart the consumer market for electric vehicles. It's things like purchasing incentives, things that make auto dealers stock and want to sell electric vehicles. Because anybody who's ever bought an electric vehicle at some place that's not Tesla usually has a story about how difficult it was to get the dealer to talk to them about EVs and to sell them an EV. Workplace charging is also a really big thing that can sort of get over that customer awareness hurdle. I think there's a lot that we.
We did a fair amount of intensive policy research when we wrote our report, and one of the things we looked at are the paradigms that academics apply to a technology shift. And it's pretty interesting. For example, the reason why the car really took off in the United States are two reasons that people don't think about. One of them is that we had already started paving roads for bikes. The other reason is that farmers needed a car to get them out of isolation and into the community. More about a process of socialization than it was about transportation. When it comes to a technology shift, these niche use cases are all important to demonstrate where the technology fits in. So your point about having them on the roads and showing where they can be valuable and effective is so important for then shifting the technology change into the realm and the regime where states can really do a lot of good and offer momentum.
I have an interesting thing to add that you reminded me of, thinking about this as kind of a diffusion of innovations kind of thing. One thing that I think people don't really know is that electric vehicles, in some respects, and I think it's going to be even better as batteries get bigger, are just better vehicles than conventional vehicles. Like they're safer, the center of gravity is better, so they drive better. The acceleration can be insane. When GM first released the Chevy Spark EV, which kind of looks like a little toaster. It's very, very brightly colored. They didn't realize that it actually accelerated faster than the Z06 Corvette, and so those owners of the Spark EV were very surprised and delighted. And it's just such a fun thing when you're driving an electric vehicle. And I don't own one, but some friends do. And my friend he has a Model 3, but it was in the shop, so they gave him a a Model S, and so he had this for a few days, and he was taking me back. We went to get dinner, and I'm like, okay, you can take me back to my house, but you have to promise to stomp on the accelerator once. And it's just the best feeling in the world. So.
Roller coaster, yeah. Yeah, just to comment on the fleet piece of that, because I work quite a bit with cities and counties, trying to encourage them to invest in transportation electrification. And no city has a problem telling everyone else to buy an EV, but when I ask them to transition their fleet, they say, I don't know. And every department's requesting an SUV, a pickup truck, just for that one day they have to drive on a construction site every year. Surely there's a more efficient way to do this. But I think that issue will be largely solved in the coming years as we introduce more crossover SUV pickup electric models to market. I think the number was 20 electric SUVs in the next 2 years. So hopefully we'll be able to address that going forward.
Great. We've got a question. John, go ahead.
Charging infrastructure. You've got the Tesla network, and then you have all the charging station infrastructure. So in building the scale, what are your thoughts on who should be paying for it, or maybe a blend between public dollars, aka taxpayers, utility customers, ratepayers, or the auto manufacturers, and maybe different ratios for different places like corridors versus local primary uses. So your thoughts on that?
Try that one? Yeah, you take mine.
Better? There we go. In our report, we suggested that a public charging needs assessment was required with partners like NDOT and the Public Utilities Commission to actually see what charging infrastructure is needed at the state level and the local level, and how to plan for it in the future. And again, brings to your point, who's going to pay for it? Is it a blend? Is it private? The utilities. But if we first have a baseline of what charging infrastructure is actually needed, that will help us in the future planning for it and making it the most efficient economic investment.
Yeah, I'll say, there's a chicken and egg aspect to this charging infrastructure development problem that suggests a role for public policy and for either public investment or utility investment that's smartly done.
I just want to share one story that I heard recently. It's back from the 1940s when the Tennessee Valley Authority, the big utility in the southeast, was building out all this new hydro. And it was part of the New Deal plan, a government stimulus package to employ people. Basically, they built out all these new hydroelectric dams and didn't have the load and nowhere to send the electricity. So the utilities decided to install electric heat pumps in all these homes, and it happened over a period of 3 or 4 years. Because they realized that there was an immense opportunity for utility to grow their market share, to expand access to electricity. And I think, not to draw like a perfect analogy, EV charging is similar in some ways. We do want to ensure there's a more competitive marketplace for charging companies, the ChargePoint, EVgo, Greenlots of the world. But I think a similar transition is necessary to electrify not just cars, but heat pumps and everything.
Do you have other questions? Emily, right there in front of you.
I just had a question regarding the purchasing credits or incentives. Other states that you've worked with, of course, Nevada, we don't have income tax. So where are those tax incentives coming from?
Good question. I think that it's a sales tax credit. And there was some polling done just last summer that showed it was between 60 and 65% of Nevadans would support some sort of sales tax incentive for electric vehicles.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
NCL report.
And there are non-monetary incentives that the state can bring to bear on this. I think somebody mentioned HOV lanes and free parking, that's low-hanging fruit. But also maybe, for example, licensing relief for shuttles at airports. If they operate there, they operate an electric shuttle, maybe they don't have to pay as high of fees to be there. So there are some areas where we can promote the attractiveness without just handing cash over.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if the state or whoever can help local governments know how to install these charging stations, because it's really cool to talk about it in a theoretical level. When you actually go to do it, it's very problematic. So helping us get through that step would be great.
I mean, we think there needs to be a centralized, like we suggested, a transportation electrification joint program office, so that there is a center of gravity at this at the state level to really influence down to all of the entities, not just cities and counties, on how to embrace this and use it to our benefit. So with that question, you know, there's a place in a center of excellence around this to help. Right. Yeah.
Check. Okay. With the Nevada market growing rapidly, especially in Reno and Las Vegas, from my experience being, I work for ChargePoint, so we manufacture and sell stations. The huge budget allocations towards the make-ready and infrastructure costs, with new growth coming, are there mandates going to be put in place to require this so a workplace doesn't have such a big budget when they do want to install stations?
I would go ditto back to my last answer. You know, a centralized strategy from the state level on whether it's workplace charging or fleet electrification for these larger programs and pushes, so that they can enhance the utilities programs or state incentives. You know, coming up with more creative packages on financing to help advance these programs is really necessary, I think.
Can we say it in harmony and a public charging needs assessment?
But I guess, I mean, just outside of like a policy in that situation, we can use, I hate using California as a case study because it's kind of half of the electric vehicles there, but Palo Alto just released basically 100%, every parking spot has to be conduit ran, ready for electrical EV structure. Like that level of that level of mandating when building new construction, I think, is imperative.
I mean, the building codes conversation is certainly something the cities can do. I mean, from an honesty perspective, you know, there's an affordability issue in Nevada on housing that's what that sort of mandate is pushing up against. But as we embrace planning for this, building codes is incredibly important for residential and commercial, and it's something the cities and counties need to be thinking about very actively. But they're just having pressure on affordability in housing right now.
Yeah, there's a really productive place between 100% and none. You know.
Any other questions?
Any more questions?
What time is lunch?
10 minutes. Kyle, do you want to?
All right, that's great. So yeah, if there are no other questions, I want to thank our panel for being here today and providing this information. And we've now come to the most important part of the day, I believe, lunch. So Emily, I'll turn it over to you for any logistical details on what people should do next. Oh.
Thank you everyone for your time and attention this morning. You now get a break you get to eat, but it is a working lunch. We're running a little early, so you have a little bit longer for talking and grabbing your food, but if you could be back in your seats by, looks like 12:30, and we'll go ahead and resume our who is the Deputy Administrator of NDEP, and Danilo Dragoni is the Bureau Chief for Air Quality Planning at NDEP.
So thanks, Rebecca, for the introduction again. I'm Jeff Kinder. I'm a Deputy Administrator with NDEP. I work primarily with the air programs, as well as a few other programs. With me today is Dr. Danilo Dragoni, Chief of our Bureau of Air Quality Planning. We'll be giving a real brief, real quick update on the Nevada Diesel Emission Mitigation Fund, or as everybody calls it, the VW settlement. I wanted to start out just with a quick slide on what our mission is. What you see up there is the division's mission as well as the goal of our air program. What I hope you take away from both of those is the first requirement there, public health. You know, we are a public health agency with regards to air quality. Really, when we started our work on the VW settlement, the first step for us was to develop a Nevada beneficiary mitigation plan. And we did that in conjunction with, and I always get this wrong, the Advisory Committee on the Control of Emissions from Motor Vehicles, otherwise known as the I&M Committee. So that committee has a wide range of members. It also includes our partner area agencies from Washoe and Clark County. Through that organization, we were able to develop the Nevada Beneficiary Mitigation Plan, which set the stage of our three primary goals with the VW settlement. The first two you're going to see is the NOx up there. At the heart of the VW settlement is mitigation of NOx emissions from the subject vehicles that were the basis of the settlement. And so what we're looking for there is, you know, how much NOx we can abate based on the dollars we're spending. And that's our primary driver with some other criteria as well. But you'll also see our third goal up there is supporting long-term investments in zero-emission transportation sector. So I don't know how well you can read this, but what I want you to take away from this is really there's three parts to our program under the VW settlement. The first one we've talked about in a lot of different presentations, the Electric Highway Initiative. Under the settlement, we're allowed to put 15% of the settlement to zero-emission vehicle projects, and so that's one of the first things we did is the full 15% to the Governor's Office of Energy for the Nevada Electric Highway. A second part of the program not many people may know about is the state's Clean Diesel Program, otherwise known as DERA, the federal DERA program. Under the VW settlement, we can leverage that money to get additional funding under the DERA program. So we have a number of projects going under our Clean Diesel program. The third part, which I think everybody wants to hear about today, is our competitive grant program. And with that, I'll hand the presentation off to Danilo.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So as Jeff said, we are focusing on the third leg, the competitive application. And we already had 1 year of competitive application, just terminated. We awarded approximately $6.6 million in awards, but we also leveraged from the partners about $9.2 million. We had a large variety of projects that we awarded. We are going to electrify ground support equipment at the McCarran and Reno Airport. We are replacing school buses, and we are also replacing refuse trucks and transit buses in southern Nevada. All these projects we are planning will be completed by the end of 2021. This year was particularly exciting for us because we were able to mitigate about 750 tons of NOx. This is a large amount of NOx. Just to give you an idea, it's way more than the total amount of NOx that all the cheating vehicles, VW cheating vehicles sold in Nevada have emitted and will emit. So that was very exciting for us. But of course, we have another cycle coming in, and this is where we were asked to kind of provide more information. The 2019 cycle, we're going to follow a timeline that is very similar to the one in 2018. We're going to ask for a project solicitation starting June 1st, so ending July 31st. And we're going to give us a couple of months and probably announce the awards by the beginning of October, end of September, beginning of October. What we are looking for. Of course, we are looking for NOx emissions and their cost effectiveness. We are interested in also project location. We are mainly targeting urban centers in Nevada, Reno, Vegas, and other cities. We are also looking for what other pollutants these projects are planning to reduce. There is not only NOx out there. We have also other pollutants, ozone, and so on. We are looking at the commitment of this project for future emissions beyond the awards. An example is a project that might commit to invest in infrastructure, charging station. That will tell us, for instance, that they will not be limited to the awards in terms of reducing emission, but probably they might have future reduction behind, again, the awards that we might give them. Project feasibility, of course, we want to be sure that all these projects are terminated in timely and with the condition properly. And societal co-benefits. We are asking what are the benefits for the general public, and in particular for minorities and sensitive population. We have out there in Nevada several school buses that are 20 years or older. We are specifically targeting those because we believe that will provide good benefits for our kids and reduce a lot of NOx emissions. And I just wanted to conclude this by remarking that the goal of the program is to actually reduce NOx. Look for incentivize more reduction in NOx. And so what we are looking for emission reduction for projects that will not have occurred without the help of the award. This is very critical for us. And of course, we do have a website. If you have questions, we have a email list, and we even have real people available to answer your questions. So don't hesitate, contact us. And with that, we have concluded our presentation.
Thank you, gentlemen, and I think we'll be hearing more and working more on this, especially on the school buses. It's kind of near and dear to my heart, so I'll be bugging you about that as well. Thank you, gentlemen. Next up, we have Dr. John Sagabil. Come on up, John. And I believe you have slides. And Joel Levin, who might still be out doing vehicle. Oh, there you are. Sorry. I'm going to turn this over to you guys, and just to give the customer experience from the EV perspective. Here you go.
Thanks so much. And since I was only given 5 minutes, this is going to be a wild ride, so buckle up. That's a slightly inaccurate number. I'm actually up by about probably 20 miles on that because I did that slide up yesterday. But I have actually driven that many miles in EVs. So since 2012, I owned a Nissan Leaf since there. I've owned e-bikes long before that. And that last line is actually kind of a poke at some people who criticize EVs, who, if you actually run their numbers, they apparently can't do math. We've heard a lot about EVs and a lot of the benefits, societal benefits and economic benefits and whatnot. From a driver's perspective, these cars are just unlike anything else. I mean, you get a distorted view of the world when you drive one of these, and I don't mean because of the windscreen. The maintenance issue is a wonderful one. If you calculate in the number of hours you sit at maintenance, waiting for maintenance for your car, your average speed goes down by a fair amount. The washer fluid thing there is a little bit of a joke because when I bought my Nissan Leaf, the salesman opened the hood up, pointed out to the little reservoir where you fill the washer fluid, said, "Don't touch anything else," and closed the hood. That's a hello. It's still, oh, there it is. Okay. That's a little bit of a joke because of the fact that all the internal combustion engines cars I owned before went into service so often that I never had to do that because the service people had to do it. So if you buy an EV, buy a gallon of washer fluid because you're going to have to fill your own. Anyway, I can talk about benefits and for on and on and on forever. There have to be drawbacks to EVs from a consumer perspective, right? And one of those is called range anxiety. We heard that term already today. Can you get there from here? Curious thing about range anxiety, which I do not think is going to make it into the American Psychological Association's guidelines yet, is that the only people who actually suffer from range anxiety don't own an EV. Because those of us who do actually understand our cars, and we just simply don't drive beyond the range of them, right? It's a little bit of a joke. So, who said it better? It's the economy, stupid. Bill Clinton, 1992. It's the charging network, stupid. J.B. Straubel, 2015. That's not a literal quote, but it might as well have been for those of you who were at J.B.'s talk at UNR in 2015. He said a really interesting statement, which he said, we think of ourselves more as your mobile phone company than we do as your car company. And it's about the network. And he put up a slide, something like this. It didn't have maybe quite as many superchargers on it. This is Tesla's supercharger network as of a few days ago when I grabbed this screenshot off there. And what he basically said is, if you can only use your car 150 miles from your house, if you have a 300-mile range, it's not very useful. So this is what makes it useful. And if you can only have to stop for 20 to 30 minutes to supercharge when you're going like 1,000 miles, it actually makes it a kind of a pleasant experience because you can get out of the car and you can move around a little bit and get back in when you're charged up and keep going. Okay, so one last thought. In 1954, Ford was selling this car, the 54 Ford Crestline. They don't make them like that anymore, do they? Wow, isn't that something? No, that's a death trap. That thing had no seat belts or maybe lap belts. It had no airbags, no crumple zones, drum brakes with no anti-lock brakes, not even any power brakes, no power steering, and don't even get me started about the emissions coming out of that completely uncontrolled V8 engine. 1954 was before the very first emission controls. So yeah, we can wax nostalgic about that, but the reason I picked 1954 is because it happens to be 65 years from 2019. So the child who was born in 1954, who started working as an auto mechanic in 1972, maybe at age 18, he's now eligible for retirement at age 65, and he's looking at that, and he said, I don't even know where to begin. So given that, what are we going to be looking at 65 years from today? And I can guarantee you that somewhere on this planet this morning, a little girl was born who is going to become an internal combustion engine mechanic. And I'll bet you, anybody want to take this, she is the last one. By 2084, we ain't going to need them. I don't know what that car is going to look like, but I promise you it's not going to have an internal combustion engine. Thanks very much.
Hi, so I'm Joel Levin. I'm with Plug-in America. For those of you who don't know us, we are the national consumer voice for electric cars. So we're a national association of EV drivers, and we are very involved with EV policy and a lot of outreach and education work. So like this ride and drive that we had here today, we do lots of these all over the country all the time. And so I wanted to tell you 4 secrets about electric cars. Some of them you may already know, some you may not know. A lot of them have been sort of touched on today, but I wanted to kind of wrap them all up. So the first one, and actually Dylan kind of mentioned this already, is that they're better. It's not just, you've heard all these different benefits of EVs, you just heard a very eloquent discussion of the benefits, and you wrap all these up together and they're just better than gas cars across the board. It's not like there's one thing or 2 things that are better. It's a very simple, elegant technology. At its core, electric drive is really just a battery, an electric motor, and a set of wheels contrasted with the hundreds of moving parts that you need in an internal combustion engine, all of which are moving, all of which are wearing out, all of which are generating friction and using energy. So it's an elegant, simple, very efficient way to move cars, to move people around. They're more fun to drive. Hopefully you had a chance to get out into some of the EVs today. They only run on domestically produced energy, so they don't run on imported oil. They're cleaner, obviously. They're safer. They're less trouble and cheaper to maintain. They're cheaper to fuel. It's like when you're charging in your driveway, like so many people do, it's like you have a gas station in your house. So you take all these things together, and it's a better technology. But and it's been around a long time, as you heard from one of the speakers this morning. But the challenge has always been batteries. Battery technology has always been the limiting factor on EVs for the last 100 years. But that is now changing really, really rapidly. Batteries are changing, year by year and getting cheaper and denser and more efficient. And because they're a better technology, and because batteries are changing, so the second secret is that it's become the accepted wisdom in the auto industry that the internal combustion engine is going to go away and is going to be replaced by EVs. That's pretty. You read the literature in the auto industry, people have kind of come around to that. It's not really sort of revolutionary anymore to say that. General Motors has come out and said, the future is electrified. The auto companies collectively are investing, something like $200 or $300 billion in this technology, which is not a small amount of money, even for them. And pretty much every major car market in the world, except for the US now, has pretty much said that they are planning for a transition to become completely electrified. The list is a long one. United Kingdom, Germany, France, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, New Zealand, Israel, India, and China, the world's biggest auto market. They've all said that they're planning to eventually move to completely electric. So that's, this is a big deal. This is something that's really changing the world. And so secret number 3 is that in the US, there's one company that has an 85% market share of plug-in cars for this last year. And it's also the same company that's the only one that's actually making money selling EVs. So obviously it's Tesla that, you have their factory in your backyard. So all of the other car companies have said, yeah, we think we're going to be making money on it, but right now we're not yet. And the reason that they've managed to be so successful is because they produce their own batteries. And they have a lot of very proprietary technology built into that, which has allowed them to be really successful. So it's a big deal. This is a facility that really is kind of in the center of everything that's going on in the world. And so that's, it puts you guys in a very special, important place. And so the 4th thing I want to say is that we work all over the country. And we talk to a lot of different states about EVs and about the revolution that's going on with transportation. And all of those states are struggling to figure out, how do they get involved in this? How do they capture some of that technology, some of that development to drive a high-tech economy? And Northern Nevada is like right there. This is happening here. So you guys are in a really exciting, special place, and I just want to encourage you to sort of do everything you can to promote EVs and to sort of advance that, because you're in the middle of this world right now, whether you know it or not. And probably 5 years ago, when the deal was negotiated with Tesla to bring the factory here, people didn't quite realize what a big deal electric vehicle technology was, but they do now. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
And thank you for facilitating the ride and drive. It's like the best thing to share with people that just aren't quite sure what it is yet. And I saw some heard some interesting comments and saw some interesting reactions. I'm going to turn this back over to Mr. Davis, who will introduce our keynote address for this afternoon. Here you go, Kyle.
Great, thanks again, Rebecca. Looks like the microphone is working. Hope everybody had a good lunch, had an opportunity to talk to everyone. I now have the pleasure of introducing the man in the Nevada legislature that really needs no introduction when it comes to issues of clean energy, because he was doing renewables back before anybody even really knew what renewables are. Back when our RPS was less than 1%, he opened the Las Vegas Solar Electric Company, which I want to say was the first installer in the valley. The first solar installing business in the Las Vegas Valley. He then went from there, worked for Bombard Renewable Energy, and spent over a decade as really the go-to resource for policymakers here in Nevada, but really even on the national level when it comes to the adoption and of solar energy moving that industry forward. In 2016, after doing all of that work, he decided it was time to actually serve in our government, and he ran for and was elected to the Assembly in 2016. Now, any of you that follow solar remember it was not too many years ago when we didn't have a rooftop solar industry anymore, really not much of one, based upon policy decisions that were made. So when then Assemblyman Brooks got to the assembly, he made it his task to fix that problem, and that's exactly what he did in the 2017 session. Crafted legislation that was really first of its kind in the country to bring back our rooftop solar industry, and to this day, it's still doing great. So after the 2018 election, there was the Senate seat that he lived in was opened up due to another election, and the Clark County Commission appointed him to the state Senate. So now, Assemblyman Brooks, now Senator Brooks, is serving in the Nevada Senate, which opens on Monday. And finally, as he's one of the few people in Nevada that is more Nevadan than I am, because I am a third-generation Nevadan. Senator Brooks is a fourth-generation Nevadan. So it is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Senator Chris Brooks.
So I only have 27 PowerPoint slides. No, I'm just joking. No PowerPoints for me. Thank you for the kind words, Kyle. I really appreciate the introduction. And Rebecca, thank you for emceeing today. And thank you to all the sponsors and organizers of this event. This is, it's great to see so many smart people in a room that are so passionate about something that means so much to me. But just to lighten it up a little bit, friends, we are in a climate catastrophe. And it is of our own creation. And we are witnessing mass extinctions. The oceans are warming. Fish are dying. Our coral reefs are dying. Forests across the West are on fire, killing our neighbors, wiping entire communities off the map. A significant part of our very sensitive habitat here in the state has burned. We're seeing historic droughts in the Southwest, while other parts of our nation are experiencing floods and hurricanes. And our neighbors, our fellow Americans, and people across this world are dying already because of climate. The mighty Colorado River, which is the lifeblood of so many Western states, is drying up in front of our very eyes. Our oldest and most vulnerable cities and communities in this country are at risk. Our nation, our economy here in Nevada and across the country face staggering costs, financial costs as well as human costs, as a result of this climate catastrophe that we're in. I mean, just this week, the nation's largest electrical utility filed bankruptcy as a result of fires that climate change has contributed to. Our nation's very national security is at risk. I don't know if I can overstate enough how important and imperative it is that we act. In my opinion, there is no longer room for debate on whether or not this crisis is real, or if our addiction to carbon is fueling this. Just a few weeks ago, our Governor Sisolak said in his State of the State address, "Let me be clear, I will not spend a single second debating the reality of climate change. It is real, and it is irresponsible to ignore the science that proves it." I happen to agree with my governor. And I think the two biggest problems that face our state, our nation, our planet today are climate change, this climate catastrophe, and income inequality. I feel it is my moral obligation to do what I can to try to make the planet livable for my children and my grandchildren. And I have chose a career and entered public service with that in mind. And I believe most of the folks in this room share that same imperative. As a state, however, we don't have a plan to tackle this problem. We have no plans to tackle this problem. Nevadans demand a plan, especially my children's generation. They have no patience for me to talk about, well, what will this impact and how will this do that? They demand action. And it's my responsibility, I think, to try to do what I can to make that happen. Up until this session, and there's a lot of folks here that have spent a lot of time in the legislature. Then Assemblyman Bob Cian and Kyle Davis has spent a lot of time in the legislature with me, and then we have Assemblyman Watts, and you heard from Assemblywoman Sarah Peters earlier that are going to join us. We were not allowed to say the words climate change, global warming, carbon, God forbid, carbon in the building. We had to talk about jobs and job creation and indigenous resources and all these other things, which are incredibly important. But let's be clear, climate and this climate catastrophe that we're in and our contribution to it through carbon and greenhouse gases, that is what is really, this is the most important issue that faces our world. So we need to create a plan to address climate. We, the state of Nevada, need to create a plan to address climate. We're ready. We're ready. Everyone in this room is ready. The Nevada legislature, my peers in the legislature are ready. The governor recognizes this. The Nevada legislature recognizes this. There are dozens of bills that are in the BDR list right now that address electric vehicles, energy efficiency, the renewable portfolio standard, all these different tools that we need to try to get to a certain place. And that place is decarbonization. Senator Spearman, Senator Orenshaw, Majority Leader Atkinson, Senator Kinsella, and then in the Assembly you have Assemblywoman Tolles, Watts, Assemblyman Watts, Sarah Peters, and many others that have bills that are trying to address this. Just last session, we passed a dozen bills that try to address these issues. Both houses of the Nevada legislature have recognized the importance of this issue, I believe, by creating, combining energy and transportation into a single committee, the Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. And there are issues that are new in the Nevada legislature that we're going to be addressing that I haven't seen in years past. Renewable gas. That's an issue that I see a bill Majority Leader Atkinson is addressing. And then we'll bring back some of the issues that we weren't successful on previous sessions. But this session, in addition to working on some of those issues and working with my peers and my friends in the Nevada legislature, I'm going to introduce a carbon reduction plan and really try to get to the heart of this. It would apply to across our entire economy, and it would recognize carbon emitters and the way that they're emitting, and just some brief points about what that would be. And I'm working with many people in this room on it, putting it together. The goal would be the mandate would be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 28% by 2025. And to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 45% by 2030, and a goal to get to zero or near zero by 2050, and it would direct the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection as well as all the other agencies in the state to create a plan to get to that place and to comply with that mandate. This is all very possible. Great strides have been made in the state of Nevada by the electricity sector in reducing carbon over the last several years. And at no cost to our economy, while creating thousands of jobs here in this state. I mean, good policy from the legislature and good regulations from the commission, the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, have made this possible. They've created my career. In the clean energy economy. The good policymakers and good regulators have created a path for me to get there, and so many other people as well. The RPS has been a really important tool in achieving that as far as the reductions we've made in the electricity sector. Increasing the RPS is important to continue this success. So I sponsored a bill last session to increase the RPS and change it and do some other things. We were able to get it out of the legislature, but it was vetoed by our previous governor. And I'll be working with the Senate Majority Leader, Kelvin Atkinson, on an RPS bill this session as well. And the governor has said, both publicly and privately, that he will sign it. And he has said on the campaign trail what his expectations are for a renewable portfolio standard. And there was a ballot initiative where the people, the voters of the state of Nevada, weighed in on this as well, and they demand it. So we'll see that. You know, and over the years, and I think it's important to note that there have been the detractors or the folks who, for legitimate reasons, were concerned about what the RPS could do to the economy or to the price of electricity. Were, thank goodness, they were wrong, and it's even exceeded my wildest expectations as far as how low the pricing can go, and I think we're going to see the same thing with energy storage, which brings me to the transportation issue. When we talk about reducing carbon and GHG as a state, and we look at what we're doing and will continue to do with the electricity sector, the low-hanging fruit is transportation. We have to address transportation. Electrification of the transportation sector is the absolute best tool for rapid decarbonization. We have a long way to go and a short time to get there. And hey, that's Smokey the Bandit. But there is enough talent in this room, and there is enough will in this state, and there are enough tools that we can use that we can do this. But we have a long way to go. As we heard, Clark County and Washoe County are dangerously close to non-attainment. And so not only do we have GHG issues and carbon issues, we have air quality issues that have really significant health impacts in the most vulnerable communities in the state of Nevada. We need low-emission vehicle and zero-emission vehicle standards. We need to incentivize the ownership of EVs. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean money, and that doesn't necessarily mean credits and tax credits and things like that, but we definitely need to incentivize it. We need to electrify fleets and build charging infrastructure. Those are things that it's a chicken and an egg case, and we've heard through many of the presenters today some of the solutions they feel they could do that, and I think that building out charging infrastructure is always a really good one. We need electric school buses for our children, and I know that there's several people, my friend Bob and Ruth from PISA, think of the value that brings. Like, so the operating expense value, I mean, it's all a calculation on return on investment, but as the report that the wonderful report that was commissioned by the state by the Governor's Office of Energy brings out, calculating how you calculate that return on investment is very important. You have to look at the overall life, the operating expense over the life of the asset, and who better to do that than school districts who own and operate that asset for the entire life of it. And so that, I think, is a no-brainer, and I'd love to figure out how to get to that place. Rudy brought up some incredible challenges we have overall with education funding, and it sometimes has to fit within that framework, which can be difficult. We need smarter, more equitable funding mechanisms for the highway fund. So, right now, if we want to build roads, we need to sell gas. That needs to be decoupled. That's a disconnect. And what technology suffers in that scenario? High efficiency vehicles, especially electric vehicles. And so we will see come out of the Nevada legislature one or more bills that say, well, let's just tax EVs. That'll take care of it. That, to me, seems to be counterproductive, and it doesn't even really address the fairness issue associated with funding the highways with gas tax. So this is my wish list, I should say. We need intelligent rate designs. So a lot of what we're doing right now needs to it needs to be incentivized. Behaviors need to be incentivized by pricing signals. And right now, I think that well, I know the Public Utilities Commission and the utilities in this state's hands are tied by some of our antiquated statutes. So I think we need intelligent rate design. We need vehicle-to-grid programs to be able to integrate these higher amounts of renewables into our overall power system. And so I know that the technology and definitely the regulatory and pricing structure isn't there just yet on wide-scale use of this, but it is right around the corner. This is moving so incredibly fast that policymakers are lagging far behind. And so these are my wish lists of things that need to happen. Modern and efficient public transportation, training programs around EV infrastructure, similar to the ones that I've seen at some of the trade schools and community colleges, including where I used to be an instructor at the JATC of the IBEW down in southern Nevada, where they're training and installing energy storage systems and vehicle charging systems so that the electricians of the future have this as a skill set. Smart tax policy that encourages the disruptive technologies that come to our state and that facilitate from a tech standpoint some of these things we're trying to do so that they are a good corporate citizen in our state. And that's me just as a frustrated legislator putting out there my wish, that on my wish list as well. But really importantly, educating Nevadans about the options that are available and the benefits. We've heard a lot from a lot of these folks. That doesn't cost a lot, and that is something that I think that we can all do, and I'm seeing a lot of that from the organizations in this room, but the legislature needs to do that as well. And here's why I think that doubling down on vehicle or on transportation electrification as a means to reduce GHG and have a cleaner, healthier air makes so much sense. Believe it or not, Nevada is one of the most urban states in the United States. So I'm looking out this window and I see these beautiful mountains, and I'll be driving to Carson City here in a few minutes, and I've got family who's inbound somewhere in the middle of this beautiful state, and I'm talking to a very northern and central Nevada crowd right now. But where I live, down in the heart of Las Vegas, and if you look at the population densities of the state, this is one of the most urban states in the United States of America. 80% of the population of this state is clustered into two little valleys, really. And so why does that matter? Well, because the average vehicle round trip on a daily basis that your 80% of Nevada makes is well within even the most modest ranges of every electric vehicle that's been out there for several years. So gets back to range anxiety and gets back to some of these offerings, what's available. It also speaks to price, because if you take a look at megawatt hour or kilowatt hours of your vehicle, the price is very tied to the amount of storage that's in that vehicle. That's one of the biggest pricing components of that vehicle. So the cheapest offerings today and in the future will have the shortest ranges. They'll also have the least infrastructure requirements for charging. So all of this fits together into a puzzle. We have very new electrical infrastructure. I mean, think of Nevada. If you've been here forever, I've been here forever. Kyle is, born and raised. Oh, sorry about that upstairs. I was watching upstairs. Sorry about that. If you've been here for any given amount of time, you have seen how quickly our state has grown. So if you take the average, if you take the infrastructure in our state, most of the electrical distribution system in our state is half my age. I'm not that old. It's half my age. So all of this goes into this picture that I try to paint. We have no fossil fuels, and a matter of fact, as of a few years ago, we sent $8 billion Nevada dollars out of state to import carbon GHG producing fossil fuels, whether it be coal, natural gas, gasoline, or even electricity created with carbon-based fuels. What could we do with $8 billion as a legislator and who deals in the budget of the state of Nevada? We could do a lot with $8 billion. Now, if we could keep some of that in our economy instead of sending that to out of state, that would be a good thing. We manufacture electric vehicle parts right here in Nevada. We don't have oil wells, we don't have coal mines, and we don't have internal combustion engine factories that we would be displacing jobs. Or we manufacture electric vehicle parts right here in Nevada, not too far from where we're standing right here today. American-made automobile manufacturing in the state of Nevada. We have the largest battery factory in the world. If you haven't been there, you need to check it out. It's an impressive operation. We have the only operating lithium mine in the United States. Lithium, as you know, lithium-ion batteries, one of the main ingredients of energy storage and the energy storage of electric vehicles. It's all right here. Does anyone remember Oscar Goodman on The $6 Million Man? We have the technology, right? So it improves every day, and we should strive to help it improve. We should push the envelope from a technological and efficiency standpoint. But there is no silver bullet that needs to yet be invented to get us out of this mess that we've created. We have all the technology. The pricing is where it needs to be as well. That too needs to get better. But when you look at renewable energy, when you look at energy efficiency, when you look at electrification of the transportation sector, the only thing that is standing in our way, we don't have the political will to get it done. So we've got the technology exists, we have the pricing is right, the need is there, and policymakers need to get with the program. And I'm one of those. I am ready. Are you ready? I think so. I think so, or you wouldn't be here listening to me on a Friday afternoon. But there is absolutely no reason that we are not number one on climate. We don't have some of the obstacles some of our neighbors have. We don't have the incumbent industries that we would be disrupting and that we would be having to try to offset. There is nothing but upside to us attacking the climate issue through the decarbonization of our state. And so there is no reason we shouldn't be number one. And so this is where we need your help. And you know, I might be speaking to the choir on this one, and I definitely have a audience of like-minded individuals, but this is a bipartisan issue. The climate catastrophe we find ourselves in is not Republican, it's not Democrat, this is a bipartisan issue. Science is a bipartisan issue. I need the folks in this room and the people that you have within your sphere of influence and your friends and your neighbors to demand that your elected officials recognize this climate catastrophe. That's the first step. And demand that your elected officials believe in science. And that's I know that's ridiculous to say, but like, I don't know how many times over the years I've heard, well, I don't believe in climate change. Well, I don't believe in gravity. See where that gets me, right? Like, so science is science. Facts are facts. This is data. We should make every decision based on data and the science that creates that data. And so demand that of your elected officials. Encourage your elected officials to get knowledgeable on this issue. It sometimes gets put to the back burner. There are more important things that our children's education, absolutely important. Healthcare, absolutely important, especially if you need it and you don't have it. All these things are so important that this end of our species that is just a few years out is not addressed because there are more pressing issues. Make your elected officials get knowledgeable on this issue. And elect representatives that are aggressively confronting this issue while at the same time creating opportunities for the state of Nevada. Those two can live together. With good policy, you can create jobs and high-paying jobs. You can create tax revenue and fund the state of Nevada, all while transitioning to a clean energy economy. And so these things are not impossible. Participate in the conversation with your legislators, your county commissioners, your city councilors, and the trustees on your school board, your regents. Anyone who is elected and anyone who gets their job by a vote, hold them accountable. And, I mean, most importantly, it doesn't happen quick, and it's not really pretty, but you need, I beg of you that don't get frustrated, stay engaged in this frustrating but beautiful thing that is our democracy. And we will get there. We will get there. We've dug ourselves out of problems, significant problems like this in the past as a nation, as a planet, and Nevadans are innovative, and I trust in everyone in this room, and I trust in everybody in Carson City, most people in Carson City, that we will get there. And so with that, I thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any of your questions.
Wow. So thank you, Senator Brooks. That is exactly what we needed. The legislature starts on Monday. I think you've heard a call to action. We have some exciting things before us and great opportunities. The one thing that I love about Nevada and working in politics is that everybody's accessible. You can have a conversation with your legislator, your utility commissioners, your whomever, because my little world is pretty small, and we can get things done. We're at time, but if there are one or two questions for Senator Brooks, I'd be happy to engage.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you got to the target of, I think you said 28% by 2025, and then you had a target that was further out?
It lines up with international standards and the Paris Accord and where some of our other states are. Now, I think we could lead on that because we have less obstacles in front of us than other states do. But by the same token, you get to diminishing returns on a state that already has a relatively low, by comparison of neighboring states, carbon per capita output. And so it strikes a balance, and it lines up with international standards like the Paris Accord.
Hi. What do you think would be the appetite within the legislature if the state were to consider taking on like a ZEV requirement or a ZEV mandate for zero-emission vehicles?
So I don't know. I don't know if the legislature. I don't necessarily think there isn't an appetite. I just don't know if that's the best tool to get it done. I think that having a mandate for carbon reduction and enabling agencies to come up with regulations to get there is probably a better forum to have the long-term, in-depth conversations around an LEV, ZEV policy than the Nevada legislature would be. Based solely on the process, 120 days every other year, jamming it through in a bill, I think having a directive and then having the state agencies and the really smart people in this room and the really smart people in these agencies figuring out that process through a regulatory proceeding is the best way, in my opinion.
Good answer.
Spoken like a true past regulator.
I love the administrative process. Any other questions?
Senator,
I like your talking about we need a plan, we need a vision, we need to put it into policy.
What are the impediments of a 100-day legislature every other year to that kind of thinking?
They're significant, and so I mean I have fellow legislators in this room, past legislator in this room. I don't know where they fall on this, but I just don't think that, I think we need twice as much time and half as many bills. But I don't know where they fall on exactly, you know, what that model looks like, but it needs to be something different than what we currently have. I mean, this is no way to run a grown-up state. And so 120 days every other year is not enough to keep up with fast-changing technological advances and industries that they're not going to wait for us. And so what that then does is it puts a tremendous amount of responsibility and power in the hands of the executive branch, the agencies under the executive branch, and the regulators in the state. And so fortunately, we have wonderful, wonderful regulators and wonderful agencies and a great executive branch. But I would like to see more involvement in a more robust way from the people's branch of government, the legislature.
All right, I think we're going to cut it off there. Can we get another round of applause for Senator Brooks?